Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for Building Changes Promote Progress fundraiser. Tonight's program is fully captioned using the link in the chat. Every one of you is here tonight is deeply concerned about the housing crisis, systemic racism, the pandemic, and how these issues affect our neighbors experiencing homelessness. What's more, it's that we share a common value that it is our responsibility to create solutions. And with that, you have a sense of hope that solutions are within our reach. I'm Judge Wesley St. Clair, one of your co-hosts for tonight. I'm also Building Changes Board President. I've been with Building Changes only for the last 3 years, but have been dealing with homelessness issues for most of my judicial career for the last 30 years. In fact, there's a period of time in my early life, in my 20s, when I was homeless for approximately 6 months and lived in my car. David?
Thanks, Wesley. I'm David Wertheimer, your other co-host for tonight. I'm Building Changes Board Vice President. And I've been involved with Building Changes probably the last 31 years or so, starting when I first moved to Seattle and was interested in then it was AIDS Housing of Washington, helping people who were experiencing the AIDS crisis find a comfortable place to live. And as the AIDS crisis evolved and treatments became more prevalent, to find permanent housing where people with AIDS could thrive. Over time then, Building Changes work evolved and moved into the areas of family homelessness and youth homelessness. And now we're really focused on not only that issue, but the underlying causes of homelessness, as Wesley indicated, that include structural and systemic racism, gender inequity, as well as extreme wealth inequity, which is a major issue here in our region. Wherever you are tonight, whether it's your couch, your desk, or your dinner table, we want you to connect with us and with each other tonight. Say hi in the chat, tell us where you're from, watch for helpful links and information throughout the evening. If you need assistance, drop us a line in the chat and someone from our team will reach out.
We'd like to start the evening by acknowledging the land we're on. And to help us with this, we would like to introduce you to Building Changes Director of People and Culture, Tasha West Baker.
Good evening, everyone. So the picture next to me is Multnomah Falls, and I chose this because in many indigenous cultures, water is considered to be healing. And over the last 2 years, I feel like we could definitely use some healing. So we invite you to pause, quiet, and reflect as we open with this acknowledgement. We want to respectfully acknowledge the Coast Salish people whose land we are on today and whose ancestors and descendants have stewarded this land for generations. We acknowledge that Seattle was a relocation destination city for many American Indians, Alaskan natives during the termination era, which contributed to the loss of access to traditional cultural supports, economic hardship, and social disenfranchisement. We honor with gratitude the land itself and all of the native tribes and bands of Washington state. We would also like to acknowledge the historical and systemic exploitation and oppression of indigenous peoples, enslaved Africans, and other historically underinvested and underrepresented people, which has led to the disproportionality in representation of these communities amongst our unhoused neighbors. We recognize these injustices, we take them seriously, and we are committed to situating our work in efforts to dismantle them. We ask that you join us in uncovering such truths at all public events. Now back to our co-host.
Thank you, Tasha, for your words and the reminder that we stand on the traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples. You can all use the link in the chat to see a native land map to find out whose land you are currently standing on.
Building Changes work is powered by the efforts of many different partners. We'd like to thank tonight's sponsor, IAMOD.
We'd also like to thank our other sponsors, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, CMAR Community Health Centers, Trutina Financial, and Washington Trust Bank. Your generosity has made tonight's program possible.
And a big thank you to all of our table hosts for tonight for bringing their friends, their family, and their colleagues to learn more about Building Changes. Please show our sponsors and table hosts some love in the chat.
Building Changes is also powered by a dedicated and passionate board and staff, united by a shared commitment to our mission, advancing equitable responses to homelessness in Washington State with a focus on children, youth, and families and the systems that serve them. If you know any of these board members or staff, please show them your love and appreciation in the chat right now.
And you can see that list in front of you. And I also want to acknowledge that we have two of our former executive directors with us. We have D'Artagnan Kalaman and also Helen Howell. So welcome to both of them and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Now we're going to jump into hear from Megan Veith, Building Change's Senior Manager of Policy Advocacy and Research. She's going to tell us about Building Change's work, why we fight for the causes we believe in, and how all of you are part of Building Change's critical work to address homelessness in our state.
Hello, Building Changes supporters, and thank you for being here. In this moment, a tie that binds us all together is the pandemic. All of us have tried to create a greater sense of stability for ourselves, our families, and our communities. Having a stable place to live has become that much more important as our homes have become our offices and our schools. Stabilizing our kids' education has become more critical with remote learning and then returning to very different classrooms. And of course, stabilizing our health is a matter of life and death with COVID-19. Stable homes, stable education, and stable health. These are the unique intersections where Building Changes works. We fight for those in our communities who don't have that stability. And the pandemic has only put a magnifying glass on those systemic injustices that lead to instability for children, youth, and families. For me, I got the fight in me from my grandmother. She raised 8 children as a single mom and fought like hell for her kids. I heard stories growing up about there not being enough food, struggles to keep a roof over their heads, and her worried about how her kids were doing in school. My grandmother never gave up. If anything bothered her kids, her mother bear instincts would come roaring through. She taught me to keep fighting, even when it's hard. And when one of us overcame anything challenging, she'd always ask, "Okay, what are you going to do next?" I fight today with Building Changes because I don't want any child or family to go through what my grandmother, my dad, and his siblings went through. I fight today because we are uniquely positioned to make a difference in the lives of children, youth, and families experiencing homelessness here in our state. Together with supporters like you, we push for those folks in our community whose needs and experiences are often ignored. As the days get colder and wetter, it's impossible not to think about our neighbors without a safe and stable home. As the pandemic evolves and with eviction moratoria ending, addressing homelessness is and should be at the forefront of our minds. What will happen to the thousands of families who are unable to pay back rent? How are kids supposed to study and do well in school if they don't know where they're going to sleep at night? How are young people without stable housing and a parent or guardian able to get the COVID-19 vaccine if they want to? As we know, children, youth, and families are the hidden homeless, living in cars, in motels, and in crowded, doubled-up living situations. They are disproportionately people of color and LGBTQ folks. We cannot address homelessness without addressing these inequities. This is really the heart of Building Changes work. Together with supporters like you, we are leading the charge in Washington State for strategies to end homelessness while working to break down the systemic barriers. We listen and center perspectives of children, youth, and families experiencing homelessness here in our state. We work across sectors, collaborating deeply with health and housing providers, schools, government agencies, and philanthropy. We test and implement new strategies through grant making. We analyze and evaluate those strategies to see what works, and then we advocate for those strategies, break down silos, challenging inequities, and addressing the needs of children, youth, and families holistically. We do this because we believe, as you do, that everyone deserves a safe place to live. Home is the foundation for building a stable and thriving future. And most of all, home creates a feeling of belonging. You belong in this space. in this community and in this world. And ultimately, that's what we're all fighting for, a place to belong. When we feel we belong, we can take on the world. And then we can ask ourselves what my grandmother always did. What are we going to do next? Thank you.
So as Megan asked each of us, what are you going to do next? We hope that you'll take action in support of Building Change's mission by making a gift tonight. Every single dollar counts. Let's take a look at our fundraising progress. We've got 139 supporters at $66,645. Woo! Thank you. We started strong with over $60,000 raised even before we started tonight's program from many of our wonderful table hosts and our supporters. Thank you. And again, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Nyamode. They've already matched $10,000 of these dollars to bring us to our current total. Thank you, Nyamode. Let's continue this momentum. During tonight's live broadcast, we have a goal to raise $20,000 additional dollars to go directly towards Building Changes.
You know, but wait, there's actually more. That we have a generous anonymous donor who will match every dollar of the $20,000 raised tonight. So a big thank you to this matching donor.
You can help us meet our match goal by giving tonight. Follow the link to give in the chat. Again, you can also text the word progress to 202-858-1233. Number is below Wesley here on the site. And this will take you to a mobile site where you can safely enter your credit card and donate. Again, that phone number below me is 202-858-1233, and the word to text is progress. If you need any assistance with your donation, you can email us at info@buildingchanges.org or drop us a line in the chat.
I'm glad David's the one that's doing the numbers, because that's why I became a judge, so I don't have to do numbers. And again, a big thank you to NIAMO, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, CMR Community Health Centers, Trutina Financial, as well as Washington Trust. And I see some of you have already gotten started in the chat, and so keep saying hello to people, and make sure you jump in there. And why don't you put in the chat and share with us why you support Building Changes?
Building Changes work is ultimately about people. Building Changes pushes for change at the systems level in service to people, with strategies and policies informed by those with the lived experience of homelessness. This work is also about building trusting relationships and partnerships with people, organizations, and agencies in and across different sectors. Building Changes does this work to ensure that people experiencing homelessness and housing instability get the support they need, not just to survive, but to thrive.
And to illustrate this, we'd like to share a video that highlights Building Changes work with the Cowlitz people and how this unique partnership has helped make a difference in the life of one young man. After that, we'll hear from Katie Hung, a longtime partner and donor, on why she continues to support Building Changes and what you can do to be a part of the solution.
So unfortunately, there aren't enough resources in our homeless response system so that everyone can get their needs met. And really what that means for specifically communities of color is that there's disproportionately lack of services and resources to really address the unique needs that those communities are facing. Homelessness is an experience that is extremely visceral. Folks who are sheltered and unsheltered alike know that there's a problem in our society when people are unsafe and unhoused. With our work in particular, we like to support organizations that really take what we call a culturally responsive approach in supporting these young people. We really want to be responsive to community providers that are in their community so that they can really be responsive to the needs of the youth that they're working with. It's actually unique that Building Changes gets to partner and fund tribal communities. One great example of work that we're doing now is with Cowlitz Indian Tribe, working with youth exiting public systems of care.
Imagine getting into trouble as a youth and being sent to a juvenile detention center, completing your sentence, and then transitioning out and not having anybody there to come alongside you to help you do that. And some of the challenges that these kids are facing when transitioning from these places are lack of resources, lack of family resources, lack of financial resources, lack of tribal resources in their communities. Terrifying to think of coming out of a place like that and not having a support system.
Critical transitions coaching is really inspiring because it's a new approach, but it just makes a lot of sense. We've seen, especially for youth who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, when they exit these public institutions of care, foster care, juvenile rehabilitation, and behavioral health facilities, they're disproportionately likely to experience homelessness.
So I met Jason about 9 months ago. He's an 18-year-old Native man out of a tribe in Minnesota who has lived in Washington and Oregon for his whole life. And he was getting ready to transition over to Green Hill School for his last 3 months of his sentence. So while there, I worked directly with his team at Green Hill and with Jason to create a transition plan for him to make sure that he had everything in order by the time of his release. That included building rapport with him and his team, creating an actual physical transition plan together, which included where are we going to stay? Who are you going to stay with? What are you thinking for employment? What are you thinking for school? What's your plan socially for your group of friends? And we kind of laid all that on the table. So he had a comfort and a good feeling about his release. And then another thing we're trying to do now is to reconnect him with his tribe in Minnesota. So we created a transition plan for him to stay with his grandma, and it's been really good. He's done incredibly well. He has kept a job for 6 months full time. He stayed out of trouble completely, has good social relationships with his friends and his peers. Jason himself has said that he feels like he has made an influence in his own community. The fact that they've seen him make a mistake, go away for a while, come back to the same community, and have changed thoughts and different patterns, I think is huge for his community. A lot of Jason's success was his own. I just came alongside him, alongside his team there to help him. And a lot of times that's all they need is somebody to just have confidence in them and help them connect those small dots in the real world here. You know, you come out of one of these facilities like Green Hill, you're freshly 18, you don't really have anywhere to go or know what to do or what your next step is. That's where we just come alongside them and show them their own vision and then help them reach it.
One thing we're really proud at Building Changes is to allow flexible funding for our grantee partners. We know that a top-down approach doesn't work because it creates real prescriptive barriers for our partners working community to do their work.
So what Building Changes is doing different from other partnerships and organizations is their flexibility of funding. Being able to purchase a Native youth a mattress and a box spring is life-changing. Being able to get somebody a driver's license that would never have been able to, that's life-changing. Being able to repair someone's window because it's broken and they're cold at night, that's life-changing. These are things that Building Changes does that most organizations aren't able to. And that's how we're going to change these young lives, because the fact of the matter is they don't have money. There's not a lot of money for them.
One important thing that we focus on is to make sure that Adam has other folks doing similar work that he can problem solve and build relationship with.
Being able to bounce ideas off of the peer network in the state and being collaborative about it has been key.
What makes us really unique at Building Changes is that we get to partner with organizations working in the community to see how these strategies are working. Innovate and iterate is what we talk about, to see how these strategies stick so that we can build solutions that are usable across the state. This is important work, and there's also still a lot more we can do. So thank you for any support you can give today.
Hello, Building Changes supporters. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm sad that we can't be together in person, but I'm so happy that you have chosen to participate virtually in this event to support and to celebrate the work of Building Changes. Even though I can't see who all is in the room, I'm making up that we are all here tonight because we share common values and beliefs, including the fact that we love this community. Every day, I wake up feeling so lucky and grateful that I get to raise my family in a community, in an environment that is filled with such natural beauty and surrounded by community members who exemplify innovation, service, and community. And yet, this sense of safety and dignity that I feel, I know isn't shared by everyone in our community, because too many of our neighbors face housing instability and don't have a safe place to call home each night. And the problem seems to be getting worse, not better, as the visible signs of homelessness seems to be increasing everywhere. What this could lead to this notion, this sense that this problem is too hard to solve, that it's actually unsolvable, and that it's a terrible problem, but it's something that one must accept if you choose to live in a big city. Well, I reject that notion, and I think you do too. And that's why we're all here tonight, because we share a common optimism that this problem can be solved and that our community can come together to work on hard things. Because we have, whether it was in the 1970s cleaning up the polluted Lake Washington, or in the early 80s coming together to say no to housing instability among seniors by becoming one of the first communities in the country to pass a dedicated local resource to address affordable housing for seniors. We have come together time and time again to work on hard issues. And yet moving the needle on this issue will require us to do things differently. We can't expect different results if we don't change what it is we do. If we want to see transformational results, we have to be bold and we have to be innovative. And that's where the work of building changes comes in. I have been a supporter of building changes for the past 25 plus years, whether it was coming from the public sector, where I was the city's housing office director, or working in different philanthropic institutions like the Gates Foundation and now at the Rakes Foundation. I have seen building changes over and over again continuously improve and really lean in with their commitment to address the root causes of homelessness and not just addressing the visible symptoms of it. And this requires, and this means that they work with people who are closest to the problem. They research, they experiment, they innovate, and then they take those lessons learned to advocate for different systemic changes at the state and local level. And they do all of this work rooted, deeply rooted in racial equity, because it's not an accident that our Black, Brown, and Indigenous brothers and sisters are the ones who are disproportionately experiencing homelessness. We cannot end the problem of homelessness unless we address the systemic inequities that are causing this problem in the first place. So thank you so much for being here tonight to support building changes and to be part of the solution. And to that end, I have 3 requests for everyone here tonight. The first is to support building changes. They do great work, but they need financial support from this community in order for them to continue to do their great work. Second is to continue to lean in and to take action on reducing and ending homelessness in our community. This includes financially contributing to organizations like Building Changes or to other service provider organizations. And it could also mean continuing to use your social capital, your political capital, to get involved and supporting advocacy campaigns in order to reduce and end homelessness in our community. We now have dedicated agencies, both on the government side with the establishment of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, and outside of government in organizations like the King County Partners Group, a new external intermediary that is hosted by Building Changes to bring the external community together to really reduce homelessness in our community. So we have these dedicated entities, and even those 2 entities in and of themselves cannot be the only solution to ending homelessness. It will require dedicated action on all of our parts. So I hope that you will continue to lean in and to take action. And finally, I hope that you will continue to carry with you this sense of optimism and that you'll resist the cynicism and the hopelessness that so many people can feel when it comes to solving hard problems like homelessness. Because we can and we must solve this problem. So I hope that you'll join me, the Building Changes staff, and the board in believing that we can. And it turns out that these three requests are actually quite interrelated, because as the young Greta Thunberg reminds us, once you start to take action, hope is everywhere. So don't look around for hope, look around for action, because then and only then will hope follow. So thank you so much for supporting Building Changes. Thank you so much for being here and for continuing to take action and supporting the movement to end homelessness in our community.
Thank you, Katie, for your quarter century of support and your partnership. And thank you, Dimitri and Adam, for the inspirational work that you do and the commitment that you continue to show. The work Building Changes does is not only unique, it's essential, especially now. As Katie said, let's all take action tonight. So tonight, please join me in taking collective action and donating to Building Changes. You can make the gift right now by following the link in the chat. Let's take a look at our fundraising so far. It looks like we are up to almost $70,000. So let's get on it. Let's dig a little deeper. I mean, these stories are amazing. What an opportunity to continue to make a difference for our community.
Thank you, Wesley. And let me add also my thanks to Katie, who also in 2006 hired me to work for her at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So thank you, Katie. So your collective action and your gift is power. It's the power we need to get on a different path. Your collective action and your gift is hope. It's the hope and the optimism that drives dogged determination to solve this problem. And most importantly, your collective action is your gift to community. It's the belief that our neighbors experiencing homelessness are members of our community and deserve to have a place of safety, of home, a place to belong.
If we can just raise $20,000 tonight, this gift will be matched 100% by our anonymous donor. And a big thanks to all of you who have donated before the event and have had your gift already matched by Nyamo. But we need to dig a little deeper. Let's make this happen, Dave.
Yeah. So help us meet our match. Follow the link to give in the chat. Again, it's text the word progress to 202-858-1233. This will take you to that mobile site where you can edit your credit card number to donate. Again, it's 202-858-1233. Text the word progress. Again, if you need any help, you can email us at info@buildingchanges.org or drop us a line in the chat.
This is more than important. It's actually, I think of what Katie talked about. And then the story that Adam conveyed is foundational to the work that actually is within. We need to utilize our privilege, because to be able to sit here at this point in time means we have privilege. So let's start utilizing it for a different good, for the good of the community.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I love about Building Changes, in addition to all of you and the 151 supporters we have so far tonight, is that Building Changes brings together what some might consider an unlikely group of partners: government, the philanthropic sector, the business sector, the nonprofit sector, people with lived experience of homelessness and housing instability, and all of you, our donors. It's unusual to have an environment, a context, an organization that brings together so many partners to say, we can do this.
An eclectic group.
Yeah.
So to delve more deeply into the issue of homelessness in our community, we are excited to be joined by Marc Dones, CEO of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. And to lead this conversation with Marc is Building Changes' own Executive Director, Daniel Zavala. We hope you stay tuned for this very authentic and informative conversation. David and I will transition off the stage and see you momentarily after that.
And thank you, Judge St. Clair and David. I'd like to formally introduce Marc Dones, who is the CEO at the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. Just thank you for being here. And I think one of the things that I was really excited about is getting to bring a bit of our normal work dynamic to other people to see, right? And I think one of the things we talked about was this being an unfiltered conversation. And I think my hope is that we can have this conversation, go into a bit of the topics that we normally talk about and discuss in a way that isn't polished or edited in some sort of a news article or a radio piece or whatever it might be, and just have it real time with kind of how we would normally do it. So thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure. I am delighted to be accused of possessing polish.
I don't think anybody would actually accuse you of that. with anything, yeah, it comes out naturally. I do want to go back to something to start with what Katie said, right, about this notion of skepticism and cynicism and the need to hold on to optimism. And so would love to maybe start with the difficulty of this issue, with the role that you have in front of you leading an agency at the regional level. What gives you optimism or hope in the work that you do?
It's a good question. I think there are a couple things that give me optimism. The first, I'll be honest, is hearing David thank Katie because I owe David gratitude. David funded one of my projects in 2016, right? And Helen Howell, who was a former ED, is now the deputy CEO at the authority. And so part of, I think, what gives me optimism is that some of us just don't quit. And I have real gratitude for those of us who don't quit. And because it is on the days that are hard, right? It is that they won't quit that keeps me from quitting. And there's also a part of that, right? That, I think back to, the lessons that I internalized early on from my grandmother. And part of that is also, this sort of intergenerational chain of hoping, right? Like this, that we get up every day, not knowing that we'll see the end. In fact, sometimes being certain that we won't, but positive that we can make it better. And I refuse to let that go. I refuse to allow despair to take root in the work that I do, the work that I'm privileged to do, because frankly, I'm here, right? Because I have been honored by my elders to sit in this seat, to have this conversation with you. I think the other thing that I will just say gives me hope is my own life experience, right? Like I had some housing instability. I couch surfed for some time. I've been forcibly institutionalized twice. And again, I'm sitting here, right? And I will also add, right, like that is not a testament to me. That is a testament to a community that supported me and got me to where I am. And so if my community can do that, if David and Katie and Helen can do that, if you can do that, then I can do it.
No, I really appreciate that. And I think, thank you for sharing part of that personal journey that brings you here. You talked a little bit about not having that despair, right? And also being a part of a community that is, further along perhaps than other places that you might have seen in your work nationally prior to coming here. And I guess in that, I'm wondering, there feels to be this tension between those of us who might see people experiencing homelessness with compassion as our neighbors, and then this sense of othering, right? Folks who I can often hear, and you hear this rhetoric, not only just, in the broader public, but in the media sometimes, in this sense of, well, just do something about it, right? I don't care what it is, just like, it's not my problem. I just want it swept under the rug. And so I guess maybe speak a little bit about that in terms of your vantage point and in this tension that we see between, again, those who might understand this issue as one in which it's a community effort, right? I think I heard community a lot throughout the course of this evening. So this notion between, right, communities and neighbors and this and the othering that might happen and not being our problem.
Yeah, I think in order to answer that, we need to understand and really embrace community, and also understand that like communities can experience trauma, right? And so oftentimes I think what we experience in that tension and that conversation is a community level of trauma. I think I've talked about this before, but if I were to measure your I'm a psychiatric anthropologist for anyone who doesn't know. If I were to measure your, like the biological markers of stress when you walk past a person experiencing unsheltered homelessness, I guarantee you they would elevate. And that is the reality, right? Because it is disorienting and traumatic to see that, right? In the same way that we react sometimes, violently, right, to the bloody scene in the horror movie, right? Like seeing that kind of trauma and pain in another person does cause us to experience a form of trauma and a form of pain, right? And like clinically, that is called vicarious trauma. Like there's a whole research discipline on it, right? And so oftentimes, right, the traumatized reaction is to move the thing that is causing that pain away from you, to other it, to push it away, right? And so I have a lot of grace actually for people who are operating in that space, because I think that the reason that they are forced to operate in it is because we have failed a lot of people. And we have failed the people who have to live outside. We failed our community. We have failed. And so the fundamental reality is that until we do better, what am I to expect from them? Like, we need to fix it. We need to get people inside. I'll just add, right, that like, oftentimes in that same discourse, right, there's this like, well, the people who are psychotic on the street, and like as a person who was once psychotic on the street, I will say, right, that like it actually is inappropriate to ask just people walking around to learn how to do like clinical like de-escalation of someone who is fully decompensated. It is also inappropriate that people have to experience that outside. Like two things can be true, right?
Yeah.
And the failure to hold that complexity is why we're here.
Complexity. I want to like latch onto this word, right? Because I think you also said, I'm forgetting the exact words, but that the idea that like we just need to get people housed, right? And I think there's often this sense that it's a simple solution, and I think in a lot of ways it is, right? People who are experiencing homelessness need housing. Case in point, we're done, right? But it's obviously not that simple, right? Because here we are, decades into, right, a crisis that, if anything, has actually existed in perpetuity or previously. And so I'm just wondering, right, like to this notion of complexity, right? It might seem so simple, but what are some of those layers of complexity? I think you talked a little bit about it, right? That the notion of that two things can be true at the same time, that there's nuance to the notion that, yes, it might feel as othering, and we can still have this sense of community. So just wondering if you can speak to that tension again between a simple solution as well as the complexity that lays within it.
Yeah, I think that for me, I see this as what I sort of have started to call the silver bullet phenomenon, right? Which is we look oftentimes at our most daunting societal issues, homelessness being one, climate change, war, and we want a silver bullet. And that's not a thing, right? Like some of our societal problems actually are complex, and that actually needs to be okay in order for us to make headway. I think that in homelessness specifically, there's often been this tension, and we've seen this play out in the policy, right? Like between this very service heavy infrastructure, and then housing first, but then housing first had all these services, and what are we really doing, right? And is the answer actually housing, or is the answer actually services, right? Yeah. And the real answer is it's kind of both. And the actual answer is that you need a menu of things to support people, because different people need different stuff. And that, again, that has to be okay. Some people straightforwardly just need housing. Other people need that housing to come with some housing stabilization support or some other form of connectivity. Some people need deep in service. Some people need a combination, right? But the reality is that if we over-index against any one of those things, we've already failed.
To this notion of some people, right, and that different people need different things. One of the terms that you coined and referenced earlier in your career was network impoverishment. This idea that there are some people that come from communities that just don't have the same level of resources as others. And often that might be why we can see that the disproportionality with Black and Indigenous and other communities of color as compared to their white peers. And so as we talk about the some people needing different things, I'm just wondering if you can speak to a little bit more depth around this idea of what are some of those different things, or how might we describe or talk about the needs specifically for communities of color?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think that for communities of color, oftentimes the conversation is much more straightforwardly economic than we want it to be. And in the data, what we see is that the population experiencing chronic homelessness, which also is often the population that has more significant behavioral health need, is actually whiter, maler, and older. And the family homelessness, just as a alternate data point, is younger. Typically, we're talking about sort of female-headed households. I use that in quotes because, yuck. I just want to be super clear. I'm a non-binary person. I don't think it's cool to sort of we just shouldn't do that. But that's what the data does. So female-headed households in the sort of 20 to 30 range, typically 2 kids, right? And they're just broke. They actually don't necessarily need a ton of those sort of deep end supports, and actually just need money. And so oftentimes when we are having the conversation around communities of color, because we operate inside a incredibly racist society, the belief system that structures our interventions is these people of color don't know how to run their lives. And so what we need to do is give them 6 social workers and 14 appointments to make every day, right? To really get them back on track, right? But the reality is that people know how to run their lives. They're just broke. And so when we look at communities of color and we look at that network impoverishment function, the solution for that is money. It's actually there is no number of social workers that becomes a house. There is no number of social workers that becomes a job. It's money.
Yeah.
And so I'm a huge proponent of and have been for years of addressing economic issues with economic solutions.
What do you think is holding us back from that, right? I mean, I think one of the things that comes to
racism,
my mind is,
Daniel.
I'm also wondering, trust seemed to be stick to my head, right? And I think it's stemmed in, right, systemic and individual racism, but this notion of we can't trust you, right, to have agency over your own solution. Therefore, right, we're going to give you the 6 social workers, the 14 other system actors. So I'm just wondering, what is it? Are the barriers as simple as that? It's racism and trust, and if so, how do we overcome that?
Well, I think we can look at some other movements that have been successful, and actually, the movement around mental health is one, right? So there was a profound stigmatization around mental health, and many of the solutions in that space were deeply paternalistic, were troubling in many ways. And a sort of nothing about us without us movement emerged in that space. You saw the emergence of NAMI as a national driving force. And then inside that, right, quickly thereafter, over the following 20 years, there were a number of high-profile federal investments in the development of shared decision-making frameworks, peer navigation, right? ways that really begin to say, okay, these folks actually can govern their own lives. What they need is the appropriate foundation to do it from, right? And in the case of mental health, it was really about having access to an appropriate setting to stabilize in. And then from there, right, being, again, with that shared decision-making framework, being able to self-govern about where am I going next and why, right? And how do I collaborate with you, perhaps an expert as a doctor, about the various clinical settings and non-clinical settings that might be options for me about determining how those things might meet my needs, but I'm making the choice, right? We really need to bring that same mentality to the homelessness space, and to ensure that people are able to lift up what their problem is, ask for the thing that will solve it, and get it.
I mean, I think one of the things that people always like to hear about are the solutions, right? So maybe with the power that's vested in your office, right, and in your position, what are some of the things that you're doing to accomplish that?
Yeah, to be clear, it's not a lot of power. My team has heard me reference that I am chief cat herder at best on my most powerful days. I think that some of the things that we're really focused on and have been in our budget agenda and in our conversations with the community are, so peer navigation is one, right? Like, we're really focused on creating a system that focuses on relationships and focuses on, again, that for us, by us, kind of like we will help our own people navigate their own problems. We are also really focused on, shockingly, housing. I think that's a little wacky. And I've been told that it's bananas to put that much focus there this early on, but we're doing it. I think that, we are also have identified that in our system here in King County, we have an administrative issue where we have shelter, we have permanency options. Those permanency options oftentimes have wait lists that are years long. And so once people leave shelter, because it's no longer the appropriate space for them, they're on a waiting list for a voucher, for an apartment. And we literally are basically saying, wait outside, right? And if you walk through an encampment, and you talk to people, many of those folks are employed and many of them are on these waiting lists. And so we're really focused on developing a housing solution and a housing architecture that at the very least provides that in-between space, right? And so if you need to wait for 5 years, you need to be able to be in a house that's yours while you wait those 5 years, right? For whatever the thing that comes after is. And then the other thing that we're really focused on, and this is a little wonky, but data. And I think that the best way to think about data in the context of government is that good data stewardship in government is not about tracking you, it's about you tracking us. And it's this question of, how do we show you we're accountable, right? How do we show you we've had any efficacy or impact for the people that we're attempting to serve? And so really trying to develop out that by name list architecture, and then be able to have the case plans that attach to that, and then say, did we or did we not have success here? I'll also lift up, though, that we're focused on meeting the needs as soon as possible of some of our most vulnerable, and that's some of our high acuity populations. So that's folks who are living outside and experiencing schizophrenia or substance use or medically fragile, and have not had an option inside the shelter continuum that can actually meet those needs. And a dark statistic that I often cite is the mortality rate for folks unsheltered living with schizophrenia is 35. So that is we could be dead, right? And so we really need to face into that instead of turning away.
No, thank you for that. And I think it makes it very real and tangible, right? The last two questions I want to get to. So one is that in Washington, right, or in this region, we always hear there's Washington nice, right? Or that we're very progressive, right? And we can say all of the right things, and that's great, right? In terms of creating a seemingly welcoming environment. And at the same time, when it comes time for taking the action, right, for making the personal sacrifice, people aren't ready to do what it takes. And so I'm wondering if you can speak a bit to that, perhaps even for some of the folks here, of what is that personal sacrifice that's going to be necessary from the general public to actually solve the issue?
I I think the sacrifice necessary from the general public is patience, right? This is not an overnight solution. And the fundamental reality is we are in deep, very deep. I mean, like I've been in this job 6 months. Like, it's bad, y'all. It's very bad. And you should know that, and you should tell your friends, because the expectation that there, again, is a silver bullet or a quick fix is patently false. And so what we need the public to do is stand behind getting it done, which means you commit and you stay committed.
Mhm.
You don't get mad because it's not fixed in 6 months or in 7 months or in a year or in 2 years, right? But you again look for that accountability. You look for the downward trend or the honesty, at least in what the real number is, right? And then you go from there. And I think that when we talk about the broad public, to me that is the most important thing, right? Is like the recognition that with complexity, with things that are hard, comes an investment of public time, right? That we are often afraid of doing. On the niceness piece. Let me just say, I'm a Midwestern gal. We're not afraid of a good fight. We understand that a fight does not mean that we aren't friends. It doesn't mean that we can't hang out again. It does mean we're fighting today. And I think you've seen me in some of these moods. And there have been some mornings, y'all, when I get on the phone with Daniel, and I'm like, okay, so I just need you to know that I'm not in a good place. But I think that like we have a politics of niceness and avoidance, and it keeps us from making hard choices because we never even talk about what the hard choice is, right? And so the hard choice is that in a resource scarce environment, funding one thing often does mean you don't fund another. That's a real thing.
Mhm.
And you actually have to be willing to have that conversation, to go to bat for the thing you believe in, right? In order to make it work. And so what I want us to do, right, is be able to embrace having those conversations in order to arrive at community, accord and consensus. But that's only possible if we're able to identify where we disagree and then keep talking through it, which I think you and I do quite well, actually.
I would say so. The 2 cents I would add to that, right? One being, I absolutely agree on this notion of like have the commitment to stay the course and have patience. I would also say, and maybe reframe this notion of a scarcity mindset. And part of that personal sacrifice is we need more money to do this, right? And that people have to be willing to do that in some way or another. And that is likely going to come through some form of taxation, right? And so like to be comfortable and ready.
It wouldn't be my place.
Yeah, but to be comfortable and ready for when that comes, right? Because to actually address the issue, we're going to need to actually fund it appropriately. And so I guess the last question I have is kind of your chance to speak to, which is what's one, as people, leave tonight and go off into their normal lives, what is one thing that you want them to think, say, or do as they depart?
What you think is your business. I'm not gonna get into that. What I want you to do is call your literal neighbors and have them over and have a conversation about homelessness. Organizing is the lifeblood, I think, of any successful community work. And organizing oftentimes is thought of as, signs and protesting, but what organizing really is relationships. And I want you to have relationships with your neighbors. And I want you to have those relationships so that when your neighbors say terrible things about people experiencing homelessness, when they question if we're doing the right thing, they can call you. Organize, right? That's what I need you to do. That's what your community needs you to do. It needs you to be a community. So if there's anything you take from this, I would actually desperately ask you to have those small convenings, to have those backyard conversations. And quite frankly, do reach out to us at the Authority. We would be happy to join you.
Careful what you wish for, right?
Oh, listen, my external affairs director is mad at me already.
There you go. But no, I think, to absolutely keep people to take you up on that offer. Marc, I just want to thank you for a great conversation today, for the commitment you're giving to our community, to this issue. And with that, I'll actually pass it back to David and Judge St. Clair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, David and Mark. What a very informative conversation. And that last point that says, how do we own this? Is we start engaging in conversations within our communities. We use our agency, our relationship to build the ability for us to generate that patience that is needed. The patience, as well as the willingness to, this is a problem that is not subject to a one-year fix. I joined the Committee to End Homelessness 10 years ago. I think it was Committee to End Homelessness in 10 years. Yeah. And that was at least 10 years ago. And it transitioned a few times. So those are I'm left with the thought of, this is what I need to do. This is how I need to own it. And after this conversation, after what you have heard, you need to decide, how can you? Think of Katie's word. What is the action? And the optimism that is associated with it is engaging in your community.
Yeah, that's so true, Wesley. And you know, one of the things that I was thinking about as I was listening to Mark and Daniel talking with each other goes back to Colleen Echohawk, when she was the executive director of the Chief Seattle Club. And whenever she talked about people experiencing homelessness, she always described them as my cousin, my brother, my sister, my mother, my grandmother. She didn't other them at all. She made them part of her family, part of her experience. And I think the more we can do that, as we think about people experiencing homelessness and think about them not as something out there to avoid, but actually members of our family, members of our community, we will go a long way to saying we have to solve this problem. So,
many thanks to all of our generous donors. And we'd like to read a few messages that have been left to share with you.
Yeah, there were some amazing things that came through on the text, and people were really appreciating the conversation that Mark and Daniel were having, and that I love this comment, Mark, keeping it real. Thank you. That's so important. And then if we go back up, what do we got here?
Speaking to the organizing expectation or need, we have Tripp, who speaks to Building Changes has always worked hard behind the scenes at innovation and problem solving for homeless prevention and needs. We want and we need to continue that. Then Mitch calls David out and says, David, I thank you for all the good work you do in so many different areas. You are simply amazing. And I wish Building Changes all success.
And from Alejandro and Norma, we have, hope you have a successful fundraiser and surpass your goal.
Debbie says, excited to learn more about Building Changes and to lean in.
And let me say again to my folks at the at the Gates Foundation and the Building Changes fan club there, Amy Carter, you wrote wonderful words when you said the Gates Foundation is proud to be in partnership with Building Changes and everyone who supports this important work.
Katie notes that thank you, Building Changes, for your great work and leadership in making our community better for all of us. And let's take another look at our fundraising tonight. Looks like we are up to over $73,000. Did we make the $20,000 match? Well, I'm not sure we did, but you can still make a donation towards this event on the link that will be up until Saturday at midnight. So make sure that you send this link out to your network. You know, this is how you start owning this, because it's not something that can be fixed by anybody else. Right. This is something that we have to engage in.
And I think the link will be up till Sunday at midnight.
Oh, Sunday, yes.
So we've got an extra day. So many thanks to all of you for joining us and supporting Building Changes. And before we say goodbye and good night, we urge you to continue to stay informed, stay connected, stay active. And here are a few things you can do to help you do that. Learn more about Building Changes' work and impact by visiting the cool new website that Building Changes has at buildingchanges.org. You can also sign up to receive Building Changes e-newsletter. You can follow Building Changes on social media at Building Changes on Facebook and on LinkedIn. Be on the lookout for Building Changes advocacy alerts and ways that you can take action during the upcoming 2022 legislative session here at the state.
And I'm going to add one more thing.
Go ahead.
Have a barbecue.
Ooh,
and invite
yes.
your neighbors over.
Yes.
And when you give them the rib, say, you know, this homelessness is bad, but you know, this is something that we can fix. It's been great to spend this evening with you. The Remo will stay open for another 30 minutes. So please keep connecting with your community and making new friends. Again, thanks to our sponsors, NIAMO, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, CMARC Community Health Centers, Chutina Financial, and Washington Trust Bank. And a special thanks to our live streaming studio here at the Barrymore, Maine studio, I think it is, in Pioneer Square, our event planners, Synchronicity events, and our video tonight were made by WittyPixel. Just a reminder that if you haven't yet donated, or you want to donate more and want to share what you learned today with your friends and family, our donation page will be open until Sunday midnight. And please have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful night.